Alright then guys, welcome to the video, welcome back to the channel, and I thought today I would do a video I got suggested on Instagram actually. I was asked basically, if you had £2,000 and you hadn't modified your EP3, what would you do? Now this was too hard for me to answer with just a straight £2,000, so what I've decided to do is I've decided to give you guys three options. I'm going to go with performance, handling, and then we've got aesthetics. And then at the end I'll choose what I think I would do in that situation as well. A few points to make, all the stuff I'm listing on this list is brand new prices and at full price. So you might be able to get a deal. The prices are right at the time of filming, but they might have changed when you go to look at the links that are all down below, by the way. And also you may have a different list of things you would do for £2,000. In fact, that would be really interesting. Tell me down below what you guys would do with the £2,000. So without further ado, let's get into the first list of £2,000 worth of mods, and we'll start with handling. Now this list I've tried to basically do not super cheap budget stuff that's probably not going to last. I've tried to do it so that you could actually build off of any of the lists and go beyond the £2,000 moving forward, but it's sort of like a £2,000 starter. And I have still tried to give you guys options that are actually worth buying. So handling wise, these Civics, obviously amazing out of the box. Standard suspension is pretty great actually, but one of my favorite things that I've done to this car is the handling setup that I've got on this thing. And I figured out a way that you can do it for under £2,000 if you were wanting to pretty much replicate exactly what I've got set up right here, to be honest. You'll probably be able to find quite a lot of this stuff cheaper. And actually, to be honest, all of this stuff is brand new. So if you're looking second hand, you'll be able to save even more money. So first off, we've got the big one. This is obviously the one where you're going to spend most of the money, and that is on coilovers. I'm going to recommend these Yellow Speed Dynamic Pro Sports that I've got on here. I haven't had a single problem with these in the, I think, 4 years I've been running them. The only issue I've had was some weird squeaking thing that wasn't actually anything broken. It was just dried out a little bit. So I would definitely recommend these. Obviously, also this car is my daily, so it's not like I'm trying to run some really bouncy suspension or anything. The other great thing about Yellow Speed is you can get spare parts easily if something does go wrong. That's another benefit which I think gets overlooked a little bit sometimes when you're buying new stuff. So brand new, these coilovers are £912, so that almost wipes out half of the cost of your £2,000. But to be honest, I think it's a worthy investment because I'm also doing this list as if you're going to keep the car a bit long term. Next up, and I think what is a smart thing to do and is why I would recommend maybe actually spending a bit more than £2,000 in one go for the suspension, is because you want to try and replace as much stuff as possible at once, so you're only taking it all apart once. I know it sort of slows down the process quite a bit, but it's actually more beneficial long term if you have everything apart in one go, because you're only paying once to pull it all apart and put it all back together again. And then like even with like an alignment, for example, you wouldn't have to pay for multiple alignments, stuff like that. So with that being said, this doesn't list everything that I would recommend doing for your suspension in one go, but I've put on the list the Super Pro caster increase front compliance bush, like poly bush kit. That's what I did on these lower control arms, because the rubber ones in all of these are probably starting to perish now. These cars are getting pretty old, so that's a great little upgrade whilst all the suspension's out and everything, to get those swapped over at the same time. Those come in at £177.58. So next up, we've got rear camber arms for the rear wheels. These are required if you're wanting to get a fast road setup, which I will get onto in a bit, and just mean, yeah, you can sort out more geometry in the rear of the car. I've gone with the Tegua rear camber arms. Those come in at £108.90. There are other options out there that are more expensive, so if you want to go for those and bump up that £2,000, you can, but the Tegua ones will be just fine. Another big one is there's no point in doing all this suspension work if the tyres you're running aren't great, so I've decided to go full send on the tyres and go for Michelin's Pilot Sport 5s. I haven't actually had a chance to try these out myself yet, but it is the next tyre that I'm going to buy for this car. Those come in at £515.72, which is a lot for some tyres, but it is fully worth it. The spec I've gone for those is 215, 45, 17. I'm running 215s on this now. I wouldn't personally push for a 225 just because I'd be worried about rubbing in the rear. It's up to you whether you want to go for that more aggressive stance. I've been super happy with 215, so I'm probably just going to replicate that again. If you want to do it per tyre, those are £128.93 per tyre. Then the final piece of hardware, I'm actually sort of trying to help you moving forward, because I assume you aren't going to just do one of these lists. I've then just said, just put a JDM front anti-roll bar in. I know it's technically no performance gain for if you're just doing suspension and not worried about changing your exhaust, but I added it in here because if you take it off, you're probably going to have to get another alignment, so I just thought I'd throw it in here. That comes in £145 brand new. And then the final thing is getting a fast road setup from somewhere. Now, I will always recommend Motion Motorsport for fast road setup. This car, unbelievable with what they've done to it. With basically actually everything I've listed on here is what I've got. And yeah, that coupled with the Motion Motorsport fast road setup, one of the best things I've done to this car. Absolutely amazing. That is, I think, £120. I could could be wrong. Check with Motion Motorsport or whoever you get your fast road setups from. But basically that total comes in at £1,979.20. I think for just under £2,000, that's a pretty good place to start with the handling on this. Like I've already said, would recommend doing probably more bushes and stuff with poly bush, maybe change some end links, some drop links, stuff like that, just to sort of freshen it up so you don't have to take it apart again. That's what I would do with £2,000 for handling. So next on the list, let's do £2,000 worth of performance mods. Okay, so £2,000 on performance mods. It's obviously quite difficult unless you do run a lot of cheap parts. It is quite difficult to get a map included within the £2,000. So what I've done is I've put stuff that you'll need for a map within this, and I've tried to get it as close as possible, but beyond this you will need a couple of extra bits before you can get this thing remapped. Again, it's because I'm thinking more long term that you're actually gonna keep it and spend a bit more than £2,000 on certain areas, but either way, this is the list. So first off is gonna be one of these Teguer carbon air intakes. They sound amazing, they look great in the engine bay, and even on standard car, actually the VTEC crossover sound is so addictive. That sound alone is probably worth it for this thing. Love how this thing sounds. Probably one of my favorite mods because of the sound and just because it's a load of carbon fiber. Can't really go wrong with that. I've opted to go with the red breather. Doesn't really matter. Just basically mirroring what I've got. That comes in at £423.49. It is obviously more on the pricey side. You could run a heat soaky cone filter in the same area, but for looks and the sound and I guess the performance for it being a cold air feed, I think this is a great option, especially moving forward if you're chasing slightly more power. Next up, we have got the exhaust manifold. Now you're obviously gonna need to change this kind of stuff if you want to run more power. I guess it kind of doesn't make sense to change this until you are about to get a map anyway, but I just added it in this list because it is something you're going to want to get if you are wanting to chase those bigger numbers. So what I've done is I've put on the Jap Speed 421 manifold on this list. It comes in at £339.99, and that is going to get those exhaust gases out of the engine faster than the standard 4 into 1 manifold will. I've heard stories, never experienced this personally because I've never had one, but I've heard stories of the flexi braking. So what I've also included in this £2,000 list is I've included engine mount inserts, which I do have, and I've included a gearbox mount insert, which I also have, and those not only will save the flexi because there's less shake from the engine as it's moving around, they also do give you more feedback through the steering wheel, which I guess is a plus or a minus depending if you want that or not. I personally really like it. So the engine mount inserts, those are by Energy Suspension. Those come in at £37.19. Then we've got the gearbox mount insert. That is by Powerflex. That comes in at £32.34. So not crazy expensive, but good little upgrades and something that should hopefully increase the longevity of your manifold. Just as a side note here, if you want to add an extra £204.51, if you want to be exact, but if you want to add that extra £200 on that, you could change from the Jap Speed to the Teguer manifold if that is something you're willing to jump up on price, but obviously that means you then go above the £2,000, so that's why I've gone with the Jap Speed one. And then you're obviously going to want to pair that manifold with an exhaust. Don't want to stay with the standard exhaust for too long because it's way too quiet. These cars sound great with an exhaust. So I've decided to put the Teguer 70mm catback on the list. I know that there are cheaper options out there, but I've gone for this one because it seems by a lot of people running this that they get good power numbers from it once they've had the car mapped. So I just thought, instead of just offering you something with a smaller diameter, like I've been caught, I mean, obviously it's not cheaper, but the spoon exhaust system on this car is limiting my power. So I'm trying to give you an option which means you don't run into the same problems that I did. So it is slightly more expensive. It comes in at £484.49, but I think long term, there's little reason to change that exhaust. Also, forgot to mention with the exhaust manifold, you're going to want an exhaust spacer. You're going to get an engine light, and if you don't want that, I've put a 90-degree spacer, which I am running on this car as well. I put an Airtech Motorsport one on the list. It's £18.90. There's probably a cheaper one out there, but this was the first one I came across. It's just a 90-degree spacer that you put in where the O2 sensor goes on the manifold. Then finally on that list, I have actually priced in a Skunk 2 Ultra inlet manifold. Again, a more pricey option. I know you could go with one of the OEM Honda options. I thought basically this Skunk 2 Ultra, the reason I went for it in the first place was because horsepower per pound spent, this is the best option in terms of your gains. So I just thought, again, longer term, if you're going to keep the car, this is a great option to get the most power out of the car. Unfortunately, the black is more expensive than the silver, so I have just put the silver in this list, but that comes in at £605.56. Again, not something you really want to run until you're getting a map anyway, so I know technically this list of performance isn't great, but if you were to spend a little bit extra on top top of that, you're not far off actually getting this thing mapped and making decent power. So obviously on top of that, you're going to need an ECU and things, which just takes this way too expensive over the £2 grand. But I think that's a good place to start, and not necessarily mean you install it all at once, but it means you've spent £2 and you've got most of the bits that you'll need to make that power in the future. And so the total of all of those bits comes to £1,946.96. So again, about 50 quid under the £2 grand. That's the performance area. Now let's talk about aesthetics. Let's just talk about, you just want to make the car look good without changing any suspension or performance stuff. Okay, so the aesthetics. I'll be honest, I love a bit of carbon fiber, so quite a lot of this stuff is going to be carbon fiber related. So first off, one of the parts I get asked most about on Instagram actually is my carbon fiber front grille, my Mugen style grille. Now Mugen never made this in carbon, and I really like how this thing really sets off the front. It looks great against the grey, and I guess this part kind of started the carbon theme for the rest of this car really, because it's one of the first bits of carbon I got. So this Mugen grille is from a company called HZ Dynamics. Mine is looking pretty tired and beat up because I've had it on the car for a number of years, load of rock chips and stuff, so I need to get this re-lacquered ideally. You will need to buy badges on top of that. I haven't factored that into the price because you can run it without, if you've got the facelift one. I have only linked the facelift one below, but they do a pre-facelift as well. This piece here is detachable, so you don't have to run this, so I haven't priced in a badge. But the price of this grille is £225, which I think is a really good price for something that looks so good. The only downside is trying to get it when it's in stock. I've had this for so many years that I was lucky that it wasn't super sought after at the time. Big fan of this, one of my favorite parts on the car. Next up is going to be this Mugen wing. I love the carbon fiber blade, and because of that, obviously it makes this bit a bit more expensive. So I can't actually remember where this was from. I've had it that long, and I think I got this as a gift. Only one I've been able to find that is paint color with the carbon wing is going to be from Delta Styling. Now that comes in at £402.79 for basically this configuration really, and that is without paint. You can get them to paint it for you for an extra 90 quid, which is kind of good. That means it arrives and you just bolt it on, but it is obviously quite pricey. You can actually get it without the carbon wing if you're not worried about the carbon, and that does drop the price down. I love a bit of carbon. I think this thing looks really good and it flows with the rest of the carbon that's on the car. Okay, so next up we've got some carbon bits from Carbon My Ride, because carbon fiber is great. We've got their carbon fiber boot plinth piece. Now this comes in at £131.99, and I just think no matter what color EP3 you've got, I think this piece looks really good. Sets off the back really nicely. Flows with the carbon Mugen wing, following the carbon theme from the back towards the front. We've got these Carbon My Ride carbon fiber door pillar covers. These come in at £126.99. Again, just a really nice piece to sort of update and modernize the look of the faded black plastic that is usually there, and then sort of allows the carbon fiber to flow around the whole car as well. Next up, we've got what is probably my favorite piece that Carbon My Ride make, this carbon fiber slam panel piece. I absolutely love this thing, a full replacement piece. It looks so good. It flows perfectly with the carbon Mugen grille. I love that the weave is also the same way. This slam panel comes in at £175.99. I think it works so well with the rest of the car. Also, whilst we're here, I decided to add this spoon radiator cap on the list. This is the Type D one because I have the standard radiator. There is a different version if you're running an aftermarket radiator, but this comes in at £38, so it's just one of those little trinket bits, but I just think the colour scheme works really well with my engine bay. It's just a cool little piece of genuine spoon if you want to show off when you open the engine bay. We then have what is probably one of my favorite bits on the entire car, to be honest. We've got the genuine Mugen rocker cover. This comes in at £299.99, and I think for that price for a genuine Mugen part, cheap for genuine Mugen. I know it's obviously not cheap, but the more I look at my engine bay, the more I'm happy I bought this thing. I just love that it's genuine Mugen. I love that it's just fresh, wrinkle red. Super happy with this thing, and for 300 quid, I think it's worth it. To continue the carbon fiber theme, I've also thrown on the Carbon My Ride carbon spark plug cover. This is £71.99. That compared to the silvery grey piece that is on standard. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I had that on. I've had this on for so long. This one's pretty beaten up. I do need to get another one because this one's got cracks and stuff. Quite convenient timing with the sun for this shot, but I've added some rear lower control arms into the aesthetics because they don't really do anything performance-wise, but they look so cool when you're behind the car. It does seem to be very difficult to find red ones nowadays. These ones are DME ones, but I can't seem to find any that are a genuine brand, not like an eBay knockoff. So what I've done is I've added hard race gold ones because I think gold does work with the black and with the Milano red cars. Those come in at £154.14. Like I said, I put them in the aesthetics mod because they don't really do anything for performance, but they do look pretty rad. Very hard for me to pick this up on camera. Oh, there you go, there's the spoon logo. I think this spoon mirror glass is a worthy aesthetic mod that actually does give you a bit of benefit by being able to see a lot more out of the rear. I've got this in the EP3 and in the S2000, and it just gives you much wider view out the back window. I actually find it weird going back to normal cars that don't have this because it's so zoomed in. This comes in at £63, and I think actually when you look at other things on the market, this £63 isn't a crazy price compared to other options. I think one of the big ones, and one that changes the front end of this car so much, is the Airwalker style front lip from Fiberworks. This is a fiberglass piece and is not a complete bumper replacement. You just take off the Type R front lip, replace it with this piece, and it gives you this more angular, bit more aggressive look. Definitely changes how the overall car looks. This comes in at £174 for the whole front lip. Obviously that's without paint as well, so just remember to factor that in. And then to pair with the Fiberworks front lip, I've also added this Fiberworks FX rear lip on there as well. Same deal, you take the Type R bottom lip off, replace it with this Fiberworks fiberglass piece. Again, needs to get painted, and I think this looks amazing. It's one of my favorite pieces because it looks almost OEM, but with the extra fin blades, it just looks so good. And it only comes in at £132, so I think that's a pretty good price considering the amount that changes the rear end of this thing. That does round out all of the aesthetic mods, so the total cost for all of the bits I've just listed is £1,994.89. About a five or so under that £2,000, and you could get all of those bits. And to completely change the look of your car for about £2,000 is pretty crazy, really. So there we go, guys. That is 3 lists of 3 different ways to spend £2,000 on an EP3. Let me know down below which list you would choose, or create your own list in the comment section as well. Or even feel free to cut and choose from these lists which you would actually go for. If it was my money, £2,000, I've got 2 options basically. I would definitely do the Tegua carbon intake. I think it sounds too good not to put on the list. I would do the Tegua catback. I'd leave the manifold to start with. And then I would either do the yellow speed coilovers and Tegua rear camber arms, and then get a Motion Motorsport fast road setup without doing the bushes and stuff like that. That does come in just over £2,000. It's like £2,053. So I guess that is cheating. So if I wasn't to do the suspension, I would probably end up doing the Mugen grille and maybe the Mugen wing, maybe even the Airwalker front lip, just to make the car look a little bit different. And that then comes in under the £2,000. I think that's probably where I sit with it, to be honest. Now, obviously, as I've said in this video, quite a lot of these parts do actually cross over and intersect based on where you go with the car. That's why I haven't listed all the cheapest parts. And also, once again, I have listed everything at the brand new cost, not at second-hand prices. So you will be able to save some money there. Links down below to everything I've listed in this video. I've listed them split up based on each £2,000 spend, basically. So hopefully you found this video useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to check out more videos with the EP3 and with my S2000. Got some cool content coming on both cars. Like this one, comment down below on what you'd spend your £2,000 on, and I'll see you guys in the next one.